All winter long, I planned out this year's garden. The last few years, I've set the intention to grow and preserve as much food as I possibly can. During these winter months, we doubled our space. Everything was laid out to have one of our best seasons yet. When spring came, our biggest project was building the chicken coop and introducing chickens to the backyard. I unfortunately fell sick setting some things behind and also some seedlings getting ruined, but everything pulled together in early summer was still abundant. I had one of my best garlic harvests to date and everything was still going really strong until we approached midsummer. This summer was one of the most challenging to date. The whole month of July into August, our temps were over 100. Everything was very dry and the plants were stressed, causing most of them to drop their blossoms. I've had better harvests from smaller gardens, and this summer at times was discouraging, but seasons like this always make me more appreciative for the abundant. Fall came quick, and by the time many plants caught up, it was a little too late. Our first frost arrived right on time this year, and this morning I wanted to wake up and capture the garden's beauty one last time before everything started to defrost. The last few days I've been really busy harvesting and preserving the last of the summer harvest, and even though this was a harder year, the garden showed so much beauty, and I think it was one of my favorites to date. So we finally got a frost last night that took out the garden. We had a low of 28. I really wanted to wake up this morning and capture the garden one last time before everything started to just defrost and die back. So I'm really glad I did. That way I could just spend the morning with my garden, even though it was super, super cold. I'm definitely sad to see this garden go. I feel like this was one of my favorite gardens, even though this year was a very challenging year compared to some other years as far as like production and all of that goes. So unfortunately, it wasn't like this season I wanted, but I definitely think the garden had a special beauty about it this year, and I really, really enjoyed the space. So I really need to start doing cleanup. I really want to plant garlic by the end of this week, if not like mid next week. I really want to get it in by the last week of October, and I can't believe we're already approaching that, to be completely honest. The last few years, our frost has been a few weeks late, so I really haven't been planting garlic until then. And honestly, we're about to warm back up anyway. So that's kind of how Kansas is. We'll get like this cold wave, we'll warm back up for about 3 weeks or so. So I still have plenty of time to get garlic in the ground. I want to go ahead and get it in the ground soon because just the storage time on my garlic is starting to approach that window where I don't want anything to go bad. I would rather go ahead and plant it. I mean, the time is now regardless. So I definitely need to start getting some of this cleaned up, and I really don't want to. I've been so busy making sure I got so much harvested and put away over the last few days, and that's kind of like the one thing with gardening is I always feel like when this time of year approaches, like late fall, like you're ready for the break, but you still have so much cleanup and stuff you have to do. Like gardening truly isn't done when your first frost comes, even though the garden dies. There's so much cleanup that has to be done now. So I pretty much compost majority of my garden minus my tomatoes. When it comes to my tomatoes, they typically always have blight, and I really don't want to risk having that in the compost and it being in the soil and it staying in the soil. Even though we do get pretty cold here and that stuff dies, I would rather not risk it, so I do bag my tomato plants. This by far was one of my worst tomato years. I've had a better harvest when it came to 8 Roma plants, minus the 25 I planted out this year. We started off really, really well until we got really warm. And then once we got warm, none of these plants really ended up picking back up because this area right here really shades out when it comes closer to fall. So by the time the plant started to rebound, this area was really shaded and nothing really grew after that. So unfortunately, this was just not a good tomato year. One thing we're wanting to do next year is have an L with the trellis. So instead of the trellis just going that way, we'll have it as an L. And this whole area here I'm actually thinking I'm going to do all indeterminate tomatoes. So instead of doing determinates, I'll probably do all indeterminates next year and trellis them. All right, so obviously it's the next day. I only got my tomato area done yesterday. Those tomato cages gave me hell. I forgot that my husband went through and pushed them even deeper in the soil than what I could do. So I was like pretty much deadlifting with every ounce of strength I possibly had to get these tomato cages out. And I still have 4 stuck. At some point I was like, you know what? I'm over it today. This can wait. So I just did the tomato area yesterday. I'm going to move like this and go that way in the garden. I think I'm going to do my trellis area last. The trellis just adds like an extra layer of privacy to this backyard. And I always hate giving that little bit of privacy up, even though it's super ugly and super dead. And even though that's one of my favorite areas, honestly, it's like the most tedious thing to clean, to be honest, at least in my opinion, just because all the vines, they're connected all throughout all that caging. So when you're trying to yank, they kind of just break, and then you're constantly pulling off plant, and it's very annoying, especially because a lot of this dies, and then you're dealing with dead leaves that fall, and then they get in your hair, and it's kind of itchy. So if you've never cleaned off a trellis before, here's your warning. They're absolutely magical. I absolutely love them. They'll forever be in my garden, but I hate cleaning them up. So that's one reason why they're also going to be last. So let's go ahead and get to it, 'cause I want to try to get as much done as I possibly can. Yesterday I googled if chickens can have basil, and apparently it's actually really good for them. So, and they really enjoyed this. So the chickens eating the basil yesterday, the whole backyard smelled like basil, and it just smelled absolutely amazing, and they ate the whole thing. So I figured I would just keep these in this little area, and then once a day I'll just clip them like a bouquet of basil and let them have at it. I started using a machete last year to kind of cut all of this stuff into smaller pieces before throwing it into the compost pile. Husband's idea. Honestly, I think it's one of the best things for taking things out of the garden and chopping them into smaller pieces, because I mean, obviously the smaller the pieces they are going into the compost pile, the faster they will decompose. So another thing I need to take out of the beds today is all of my Oyas. So if you live in an area like I do where the ground will eventually freeze, these can actually crack if they get too cold, and then they end up having moisture to them. So I like to take them out of my garden beds. I will clean these in like a water bleach ratio, let them dry, and then I like to store them in their boxes. So if you're thinking about getting Oyas, or if you have Oyas and you haven't thrown away the boxes, I definitely suggest keeping the boxes. Makes them a lot easier to store, because as you can see, they are a very awkward shape. Just like that, the garden is pretty much cleaned up. Minus everything that is like cold hardy or a perennial. It honestly feels really nice to get it all done right away. I can't believe I got as much done today as I really did. I am so dirty. I really need a shower. I am so hungry, but I feel very accomplished getting so much done today. So yeah, I'm gonna have to weed everything. I'm gonna mend beds. I'm gonna mulch everything before winter, and I'm gonna be planting out garlic next week. So there's still so much I need to do. Like this garden, it's such a mess. I'm just so glad I got a lot of that dead foliage out. But I think this is one of the first falls that I feel very content with moving on to the next season. Obviously, like, it's always so sad to see something go, but I'm so excited about starting to plan next year's garden and starting to seed shop and see what things I might want to change. And this is just the beginning of that. So very excited about that. Gardening never ends. But on that note, guys, I think I'm gonna go ahead and conclude today's video here so I can get inside and shower and eat, because I am very hungry and very dirty. But I'll see you guys all next week. Bye.